from the marketing lens perspective, which is a little bit different than we've seen in the past. What are you guys' take on that?
So I'll jump in. It's music to my ears because when I started my career in HR and benefits, I used to tell our teams, we are marketing people, we're selling our benefits to our users. And we really have to think of it in a different lens versus the one size fits all approach and figure out what's in it for the employee, what's in it for the family member, and then really target our messages, our programs, our products to those individuals from really a marketing and engagement perspective. So I'm here for it. I'm glad we're finally talking about marketing and benefits, finally.
Love that. Daniela, how about you?
Yeah, I think Philia said it best. I think the other thing that I think about as a leader is if we don't market our plans or our programs well, we're going to see low utilization across the board. And that means we're not doing our job by offering the right programs. And maybe they are the right programs. We're just not seeing the care or the employees taking care of themselves where we want them to. And without the marketing, your programs really won't be as successful as you'd like them to be.
All right. Well, I would call open enrollment season basically like the Super Bowl for benefits, if you will. And for all of you who are leading the charge on this, before we just dive too deep into this, I want to just check in. It's always good to check in and see how everybody's doing. How is open enrollment going for you right now? And if you're listening right now this morning, we'd love to hear from you in the chat too. How's open enrollment going for everybody this year?
Yeah, open enrollment is the busiest time of the year. I personally love it. It's when we can really show who we are as a company and how we want to take care of our employees. But it's also a time where we really learn about where our gaps are in our processes, if we have anything that we need to fix. So it's a great time, but again, always chaos and always crazy, but in a good way.
Yeah, it's day 2 for us at Transparent for open enrollment. So yesterday morning when I woke up before the sun came up to run to our enrollment platform and see if everything worked, it did. So my team and I are very happy because it's taken a lot of time and energy, a lot of chaos, a lot of moving the chess pieces around, trying to figure out what's working, what's not, how do we get there to make the event a success for our employees. I always say once we get to day 1, and if we don't have any hiccups, we've done what we're supposed to do. So we're finally, I think, in recovery mode now.
All right. Well, I just want to remind everybody who is out there watching and listening this morning, if you do have a question, a burning question that any of our leaders here can help to answer, please feel free to use the chat so that we can get those questions and we'll make sure that we address them throughout the session. All right. What's the biggest challenge? There's probably a lot of them, but the biggest challenge surrounding open enrollment for your team specifically, what are you guys struggling with and dealing with there?
I think for us, it's finding a balance between those who are returning to office and those who are still remote, and how we ensure that there's active participants in all of our open enrollment sessions. We have a ton of activities and sessions that are happening in office, but we also have a lot of employees that are remote. So making sure that they're absorbing what they need to is really a priority for us this year. We've made some big changes that we do view as positive, and we want to make sure that they land well across the board.
Very similar comments as Daniela. You know, we're launching a lot of new programs, making a lot of very positive changes, connecting the dots between what I mentioned earlier, the data. What are we seeing? How do we really position our plans in a way that our employees and their families see the value? I also think another big challenge for benefits teams during open enrollment is balancing the day-to-day work that comes in during such a chaotic time. And if you've never really worked during open enrollment, on open enrollment, you don't really understand like what goes into it. And so I think helping our partners understand, like, look, there is going to be a period of time where we are going to be delayed in our responses. And, you know, we just can't do all of it during that 2, 3, 4 week period. So balancing the messaging to the employees, really getting on the same page about the positive rollout, and then managing expectations internally, and probably even with our own family members, right? Because we're working long hours just to ensure that what we are putting out there for our most important asset, right, our employees, is what they expect.
Thank you. And it sounds like from those who are listening in today, we have some that say it's super busy. Angelica said it's very busy. Vanessa said it's crazy right now. And Lori says they're still putting plans together. So there's a lot of different fluctuation around this time of year. Absolutely. Vanessa said she's also getting a ton of questions. So I can imagine what you guys are dealing with. I know we all just on the side of having to actually enroll in things. Sometimes we read things and go, I don't understand that. Who do I reach out to? It's a whole lot of fun. But Daniela, you brought up a great point, and I want to touch on this for a second because I was recently at a benefits fair for a client, and it's always really good time spent with the members to really get to know them and like what their needs are and what resonates with them and hearing the different types of messaging that might work with one group versus another. But this is an in-person effort, right? And so I want to talk about, you mentioned the difference between like those that are remote versus the on-site employees who we have to reach to. And so they're really two different types of outreach efforts. What are some strategies that you are leveraging to engage in person as opposed to just fully remote workforces? Because there is a difference there. And I'd like to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, it is a huge difference. I think we start as what I really remember 5-6 years ago when we were all really in office. What are the fun things of open enrollment and how do we bring them back? We partner open enrollment with kind of Wellness Week, Wellness Month. So we're doing a step challenge that allows employees to participate remotely, but we're also doing in-office events that we think really go a long way during a time where we are asking employees to review what makes them or how we enable them to be healthy. So we're doing a farmer's market in our offices in the coming week where they get to pick out their produce. But on top of that, we book out rooms in our offices. So if an employee wants to dial in and watch a session from a table, they are more than welcome to do so. I go in office and I host office hours and we utilize all of our resources from our broker. But I think it's really understanding what employees need and how they want it. Regardless if they're remote or in person. We're very Slack heavy. We're very email heavy, but we also know that employees like their answers within seconds rather than waiting 24 to 48 hours. And we do try very hard, to reach that. But again, we're a very small team and I really am not sure how many people you have on your team, but it is so hard to navigate when you have a lean team, but we do our best to make sure we're meeting everybody in the middle.
Yeah, lean team here as well. So we're doing all of it at the same time, benefits, comp, you name it, all during open enrollment. So I think we're transparent. We're a predominantly remote workforce. So engaging through Slack, which we also are very Slack heavy, emails, creating shared pages so we can easily link information. We're actually hosting webinars this afternoon so that employees and or spouses can ask questions. Also offering office hours so that we can have, some people might have one-offs and they want to just talk live versus Slack and email. In my past life, came from manufacturing. So, everyone's on site, spread out all across the country, over 350 locations. So really arming the HR teams or the wellness champions at those locations to engage their population in the way, similar to what you said, Daniela, like what works best for them? Is it bringing in food because it's a 24/7 operation? How can we engage them in a way so they want to come and participate? And then also coupling that with, virtual fairs, if that works for your environment, or bringing in your partners or your internal teams to talk about, in person or webinars about the benefits. So I think all of the tools that we've had available for years, really, we just have to figure out what works best and how to, implement those depending on whether you're in person and likely also remote at the same time.
Excellent. All right, this is maybe a less fun question here, but how have your open enrollment plans changed over time due to inflation? Costs are going up. Tell me a little bit about
that. So I think to be good stewards of our business, right, regardless of which area we work in, we're always looking at what's working, what's not. How can we shuffle things around? Do we really have to eliminate? How can, or can we reposition based, I think, in our world, who is using the programs? What's the biggest value that individuals are getting out of it? Also, really negotiating with your vendor partners so that you are getting the best possible pricing, so that, again, you don't have to shift cost unnecessarily or eliminate benefits. There's always going to be an increase, most likely, to your payroll premiums because of inflation in general, and we're never going to get out of that situation where healthcare inflation is usually rising at the same pace as regular inflation, if not higher. But how do you, I think our job is to ensure that we've done everything possible to ensure we have the best pricing, the best vendor partners who are going to provide that long-term value. And then also really shifting the focus and the message perhaps on the benefits of prevention and early detection of chronic conditions, so that you start really focusing on the root causes of some of these more severe conditions, and try to really encourage employees and their families to get those screenings so that we can mitigate those long-term costs in the future, which then helps you every open enrollment because your costs are starting to flatten out over time.
Daniela, you want to go ahead? That was good. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great. I couldn't agree more. I think for us this year, as Philia mentioned, our premiums went up across the board. There was no way to avoid that. I think every company who is working in insurance did see a significant increase with their premiums. And it's hard to navigate when you think of what's the messaging to your employees. How do we make sure that we're still within benchmark and have the offerings that we want to? I think we've done a good job of staying in benchmark and being above in some areas. With regards to utilization, we really looked at what programs are working, and if they're working, why, and if they're not, why aren't they working? We did move the needle on our stipends. We've consolidated in the sense that our employees will have a lifestyle spending account in 2025 rather than having different buckets for different things, and they get to really define their benefits. And I think that's the way that we can be more successful when we think of cost and efficiency, but two, allowing employees to really say, this is what I want, and this is what I need, and this is how we get them there.
Choice is a good thing. We see that more and more in different facets of business all the time, but choice is a good thing. We really appreciate that. How are you using, or maybe even planning to use, AI to simplify the open enrollment process, both for your team, but also for the member who's enrolling? Is anybody trying to use that or using it now?
Well, we certainly are. So within our benefits team, we use our new transparent offering, which is Just Ask Transparent. So got the shirt this week. And we love it because we are able to use the technology to be able to not only answer our own questions about what benefits are available, how do we program the technology so not only we can use it as a team, but encourage our employees to use it. And it's simple stuff, like questions that our employees would normally bring to HR, right? Is how do I enroll? How do I know which dependents are eligible? What plans do we have? What's the cost? And now our employees and our benefits team can actually go into the Just Ask Transparent app and ask those questions. So we're really trying to use the technology as the front door to those basic questions that we typically get. People get the immediate answer, and then it may even spark something else that they can ask in the app. And then if it is a bit more complicated, they can talk to our team, they can talk to their vendor partners, whomever that is. But it really is, I think, leading us to try to really simplify and make it easy for people to get the answers that they need quickly versus spending a significant amount of time writing, the 80-page guides that I think we're all used to writing in our career. So I think that's how, well, we're definitely starting to use it. So we'll report back next year and see how well it went.
So to date, we do not use anything AI related. Transparently, we do partner with Newfront as our broker. They have a really cool app called Benji that is integrated within Slack. So we're hoping to use that in the future, and they can ask any questions on like what's their out-of-pocket max and how do I find my ID cards. And hopefully, in a world we can mitigate what we use today as Zendesk and Benji. So we also, are giving employees an experience that they can have answers at the tip of their fingertips.
So I think it's fair to say we're hoping that with all of these different AI approaches and strategies and help tools that we're really hoping to solve for some of that knowledge gap that exists, right, between everything that's put out, all the information, and then what the member needs or doesn't need or doesn't know that they need yet. And so any other final thoughts on that, just in terms of so when it comes to benefits, maybe not even at open enrollment, but down the line later on throughout the year when you actually do end up needing that benefit, does AI come into play in helping to bridge that knowledge gap?
Sure. In fact, we just launched a new benefits enrollment platform that has a really sophisticated plan modeling tool within the system. So it's predominantly used during open enrollment because, of course, that's when most people are looking at what their benefits should be for the next year. But you can go in if you have a qualifying life event, for example, you get married, you have a child, you can use that technology to then help you reevaluate your current enrollment elections, and then what might you really need that you don't have today, or what do you have today that you don't need going forward. So it's a really nice opportunity for individuals to kind of take a spot check on what do I have, what does it mean, is there value, and then do I really need to reassess because I've added a dependent, or I'm going to think more about this when I get closer to open enrollment because now I've really thought a little bit differently about what I have available.
Great. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Danielle.
I was just about to say the same thing. We have a comparison tool, which we didn't offer last year that we do offer this year, showing our changes, but also the increase in our premiums and what each plan covers and how that benefits them. So it's been only a couple of days since we've given our pre-read and open enrollment, and our employees have access to our site, but feedback has been positive.
Just that you raise a good point, Daniela, because I think what these tools are able to do is help us be more transparent. So to your point, you go in, you can model your plan, but you actually not only see what you're paying as the employee, but what your employer is contributing to those plans. And that's a really important, I think, ingredient to all of, benefits marketing, because most people, rightfully so, don't know what the cost really is. They just know what they're paying. So the more we're transparent in showing, yes, you pay this for medical, but your employer is contributing this amount. As you scroll down and you see your company paid benefits such as life insurance, you actually are seeing what your employer is paying towards that benefit. So it really is kind of the aha moment, which you want to create, because it actually leads to perhaps more understanding. I always say that you might not like what I tell you, but at least you have a better understanding of why we've had to do something differently. And I think that just helps position more of what we were talking about at the kickoff is the marketing approach, because you are now starting to personalize that information and people pay attention to it when it's personal.
It's a great point. I want to ask something now about feedback, because this is a really important piece of how I think you really strategize for the following year, how we're going to leverage open enrollment and what we're going to do based on what worked or did not work this past period. So I'm curious to know, one, how do you guys gather feedback? And is it in real time that you're making adjustments, or is it something that's just compiled and we use that for later on? But also, what has been the reception to these apps you guys have actually leveraged this year or implemented this year? Because there's got to be some sort of behavior change in that, right? Like it's a different process. And there's some sort of education that would need to be given out to employees on how to use this. So what's the strategy around that? So kind of a twofold question.
Yeah, so for feedback, we host feedback sessions with our broker once a year for employees to, you know, be our biggest critics, right? Where what's working for them, why, what isn't, but also what are they looking for and how do we get there? I think it's really important to take your team, your leaders out of the seat so you really get raw feedback from your employees, right? They might give you the high level of how they feel. They're not going to give you everything that you really, really want. And you do need to make the decisions that you need for the following year in your plan offerings. For our systems and how we make the switch, ours was definitely a little more seamless than like I thought it would be, to be quite honest. We use Zendesk for a lot of our information, but this year we decided to route everything to our benefits website. I think as a leader, and when I think of how lean my team is, it didn't make sense for me to build out two different platforms with the same information. So rather than doing that, we basically just linked to our new benefits website. And then within the website, we gave all the information that we would typically have in one system in another. And we made sure that everything that we know that employee always asks for is there. With regards to how we moved to the comparison tool, yes, we did get some questions, but we did reiterate like you can compare one plan year to another and you can see the differences, and then that when one comes, our website will fully switch to only show our offerings for 2025. I do think that there is room for confusion, but as long as you're clear and you continue to reiterate your message, whether it's through email and through Slack, employees are able to absorb changes pretty well.
Great.
Yeah. So we definitely take immediate feedback. I think the beauty of where we are is our employees are very open and vocal, which is great because it helps us understand what's working, what's not working in the moment. We will do a post open enrollment survey to get feedback on how did you like the new plan modeling tool? How did you use Just Ask Transparent? What do you think about the changes we've made? We'll use that to at least prepare for next open enrollment, which won't be too far away. And then we will actually what I'd like to start doing is really including in our, we have ongoing engagement surveys. So, put in a question or two about are the benefits that we offer to you, you as an employee and your family, are they valuable? Are they working? Just to get some ongoing feedback, especially as the year progresses. You don't want people to just think benefits enrollment or education is a one-time event. So how do you continue to get those pulse checks throughout the year so that we can continue to, either move in that direction, which is where we intended to, or how quickly do we have to pivot if something really isn't working and make a change. So definitely ongoing feedback, but in different methods depending on what we are trying to get from the employee.
So you both have mentioned now a couple of times that you have very lean teams. So I'm curious to know, because this is such a busy time of year, you have this massive influx, I'm sure, of questions and other administrative tasks that have to be taken care of during this time. How are you handling those? What are some of the strategies you're leveraging for a lean team to be able to make sure nothing falls through the cracks?
Great question. So for Plaid specifically, we're Zendesk users. We're Zendesk heavy. We, prior to open enrollment and throughout our year, create canned responses, but we make sure that there's room for us to edit them to make sure that we're empathetic and really leaning into the questions that we're receiving. But again, as a team of two, it's really hard to make sure that we're meeting our SLAs. And then additionally, with Zendesk, we track of the questions of what we get the most noise on, or try to understand where we need more support. And then once we have the data that shows we're getting X amount of questions about this benefit, or we need to get more in detail about a specific offering, we then update our website or the resources that we have so we make sure that those are answering the questions that are coming through prior to even receiving them.
And We just created, in partnership with our IT team, an actual inbox, an email inbox that's in a ticketing system now, so that we can actually track what the question is, who's responding. We can assign it to different people on the team. We wanted to do that, particularly for the start of open enrollment, so that we actually can go back and see how quickly are we responding, because that's really important during not just open enrollment, but on an ongoing basis. So how can we improve our service response to our employees? We also, I think it's really important, especially with a lean team, is we all roll up our sleeves and do what we need to do. So there's no distinction necessarily of, one person is going to just handle all of this. We all really do it together. And I think what I've learned over the years is it actually really is a great opportunity to build that team environment and get the team really excited about an event that really is extremely stressful, time consuming, and it takes you away from really being able to focus on anything else. So we're focused a lot on tracking, making sure we're responding, what are the issues, identifying them, but then also really trying to have some fun and make sure we're all surviving this 2.5 to 3 week period that literally took 6 to 8 weeks minimum to get ready for. So
We want to thrive, not just survive, but we're getting there slowly. I have a question from a member's perspective now, because I know that this probably happens more frequently than we'd like to think that it does. But one of the challenges with open enrollment from a member's perspective is that there's so much information to digest. And some of it we understand, some of it we don't, and that's where we'll have questions and whatnot. But because it takes so long sometimes to process this information and make the choices that are right for your family and for you, how do you handle those of us who end up missing the deadlines, don't follow the process correctly, make some mistakes in what we were filling out? How do you handle those members?
So we do a tremendous amount of outreach and very targeted. So we have an ability to see, through our Ben admin platform, how many people have enrolled, how many have started their enrollment, how many have finished their enrollment, how many have not touched their enrollment. So we will have an ability over the next 2.5 weeks to say, okay, on Tuesday next week, let's target an email to those individuals who have not started and who have started but not finished. And then we'll keep monitoring that as we go through, so that we can make a personal outreach to say, hey, don't forget, it's an active enrollment. You need to enroll or waive coverage. So that's probably one of the ways that we are doing it. The other thing that I think is really important, it's to continue to not think about open enrollment as a one-time event. It's really about communicating all of the time. And I think it may have changed, but the old message was you have to tell someone 7 times the same message for it to actually resonate within their own thinking process. So it really is about, how do you find your benefits? What you're eligible for, what are you actually enrolled in? Because most people don't even know that. And then throughout the year, what are those marketing campaigns to remind people? For example, if you have voluntary hospital indemnity and you've had an inpatient hospital situation, you should go file that claim to get that cash back. And people just don't remember. So during open enrollment, it's making sure people get it done. The rest of the 11 months is all about reminding people what they have, and then how do you enroll when you get to open enrollment, and why it's so valuable for you to continue to think about what you have.
I couldn't agree more. I think on top of emails, for the past, I want to say 3 years, we've been in a passive enrollment. We haven't made changes to our insurance plans, but HSAs and FSAs are always active. So when we get to the last, I think it's 3 days, I personally do Slack anyone who is enrolled in an HSA or an FSA. That money is important. Additionally, Plaid does seed some of our accounts there, so that's dollars on the table if they're not actively enrolling in that they'll lose. I do think that we reiterate the message again throughout the year, right? To parents of newborns, they have 30 days for their QLE window. Open enrollment is just a little shorter, and making sure that they understand what happens if they do miss the deadline and how we make sure that they cross that finish line successfully.
I want to go a little bit deeper into something that you brought up, and Daniela, you've talked about this a little bit too, but engaging employees to actually use the benefits, because it's great if we have all these wonderful things, but if nobody's using it, is it worth it, right? And you talked about being able to measure the success of the program. So I'm curious to know, because I've been hearing more and more as I've been out working with members and at benefit fairs and whatnot, specifically with certain employee populations in particular. And I'm thinking about like those that are in the field all the time. They're not strapped down to a computer all the time. Shift workers, people who have to bid for time off when they need to use a benefit, as an example, or just who feel like they don't need the benefit at all, but they signed up for it until they need the benefit. And then of course it becomes a really big deal. But how do you keep the available benefits that are offered in front of employees who aren't strapped to that desk, who aren't looking at their computer all the time? I mean, we've even got clients with members who don't use smartphones at this point. So you cannot give them some of that lovely messaging you'd like to give through the channels you'd like to give it to them through. How do you keep them engaged throughout the year so that they remember they have these benefits when they need them?
So, can't agree more, because before coming to Transcarent, I spent 24 years in a large manufacturing company when we had all of these same questions that you just asked. And yes, some had flip phones still. So, how do you get the information? We spent a significant amount of resources, really target marketing. If there was a spouse or a partner at home, sending postcards. How do you get them engaged so that the people in the home know what's available? My budget was actually, unfortunately, probably higher than most other budgets, because we spent so much on print because we had to. We didn't have other ways to get information into the hands of the employees who don't use technology, who might be driving a truck all day long and are not allowed to use technology because the focus is safety and driving. And then it was also about, how do you create a benefits ecosystem or intranet, so to speak, where everything is put into one place. So we worked really hard and continue to do that here at Transcarent to put everyone's benefit information in one app or one location, so that you don't have to constantly go to the 8 or 9 vendor partners that we have to get specific information. Really focus on SSO. How do you simplify that process through single sign-on? So if I'm in my Transcarent app, for example, I can click on one tile and set up that SSO connectivity, and then we're done. So reiterating constantly, again, it's that 7 times per message, is here's where you go, here's where you click, and then what else do we need to do as good business stewards to make sure our employees understand on an ongoing basis what benefits they have. And that's going to vary by, I think, industry, by the workplace, but it's going to probably be a compilation of digital, in person, and that may be through camera. And then also there's probably an opportunity for some written materials to go to the home.
Direct mail is not dead. I just want to say that very clearly.
If you use it properly and you make the message so engaging and short and simple, and you pull them in, right? It works, and you really will see utilization go up in whatever area you're trying to drive that engagement.
Absolutely. Daniela, did you want to add anything on to that?
Oh, no, I think Philly has said it very well. Plaid's predominantly a tech company, so we're very technology centric. But I know that in the past, we've done like wellness boxes tied to open enrollment, so that doesn't just hit the employee, it hits their dependents as well. And it gave their dependents to have access to the information that they needed for the next year.
Wellness boxes. I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
I
Good idea.
remember something we did in my former life when we launched our new Ben admin platform. We actually did a scavenger hunt launch at the beginning, day one of open enrollment, so that you had the duration of open enrollment to do it. But to get people familiar with the site, we actually gave you questions in your open enrollment guide, and we could track like who clicked where and who got to the end of the scavenger hunt, and then we gave away like through a random drawing wellness prizes, and it really did help. It helped people learn how to use the site, learn where to find information, so little things like that, and I think it's a great opportunity for the teams to be really creative in how do you engage your target audience on what you want them to do. And so also think about having a little fun with doing all of this really chaotic work.
We like fun and we like creative ideas. That's a very important piece of my job. So I appreciate that, and that you guys are thinking through that as well is awesome. I guess I'm curious to know at this point, there's a lot of pain points when it comes to open enrollment, clearly, but is there something that you actually look forward to when it comes to open enrollment?
I really look forward to understanding and seeing that we've heard our employees. The reaction, of course, twofold. You're going to probably have some employees that are really happy with what you're bringing to the table, and others that are not thrilled or about a change. And that is the reality of the space that we work in. And I think Philia said it earlier, this isn't a one size fits all model. Like, we really wish that it could be. But I think just seeing and knowing that when we do our best to make the right decisions for our company and for our culture, we see a bigger and positive impact on our employees and the way that they bring themselves to work with our offerings. I don't think it's always about taking care of more or taking more off of an employee's plate. It's really understanding just where they're at. And when you're able to do that, there's sort of like this shift on how employees show up and how they can be their authentic selves when we have the right benefits in place.
Putting people first. I like that.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we do, right? I mean, that's our goal. I really get excited about meeting new people during the open enrollment timeframe. There's always someone who, legitimately has a question about whatever it is that they want to know more about. So I think meeting people, getting a little bit more deeper into how are you feeling about your benefit package? It's an opportunity to, if they reach out to you for a question, I'd like to go back and ask them a question. And then use that to build off of what are we doing well, what do we need to change. And I really do love the team spirit. I've got 3 people on my team, all who do a little bit of everything. And we really have just, it's the daily check-ins. It's making sure not only are we okay, but what else can we do to make this even better for our employees and our organization? Because, right, all of this has to be aligned with the overall business strategy. So as long as we're meeting those objectives and those deliverables along the way, and our employees feel really good about what we're offering, I think that gives me the biggest amount of pride over what we do.
So each of you have kind of mentioned to some extent that you've added some new things this year to your benefits package. And I want to maybe just talk about that for a second, a little personal here. But based on your benefits packages that you are putting out there this year and implementing, what types of things have you been implementing this year that are really impacting the experience of the open enrollment? We talked about the AI piece, but in terms of the actual benefits, what are you guys implementing and rolling out that's going to make a difference this year based on feedback from last year, or even just recently that members have brought to you and you've said we need to make a change here and do something that is going to benefit the employees?
I spoke a little bit about it earlier. We are moving to a lifestyle spending account model. We're giving our employees the flexibility that they want to create their own benefits, whether it's for additional money for daycare or pet insurance or, helping take care of their wellness, whether it's a gym or, even additional sessions in therapy or other things that although they have access to, they may need more of. That's what we're doing. I think it's a huge win. I think it's something that we're doing not just only within the US, but globally as well. We're making sure that we're providing an equitable experience to all of our employees, regardless of where they are. I think that as any company or a company that is US centric, it's really hard to find the balance in some areas to make sure that you are giving the same thing everywhere. And how you explain, hey, you might be not getting this, but you're getting, a better parental leave instead because of statutory requirements. There's never going to be a truly equal balance, but as long as you're doing your best to get you there and get your offerings there, I think it does land well. And I'm excited to see what our employees use their LSA for.
So we had heard loud and clear that our employees were not very happy with the TPA that we used. So the first big effort was to identify who is the right TPA for us. And so we spent a couple of months going through the usual process of the marketings and the review of the bids and all the finalist meetings. And I think one of the biggest positive changes we're making for next year is that we do have a new partner, and we are really going to be able to capitalize off of the well-being platform that is built in through the TPA model. It'll be really fun and exciting to start creating a holistic health and wellness strategy for our employees, really looking at the physical, the emotional, the social, and the financial components, which we have bits and pieces of right now, but it's just not connected. So I think that is going to be a really great opportunity. Daniela mentioned earlier that, you have a step challenge, going on right now to keep people, whether it's motivated or take a little bit of, more focus on their well-being during open enrollment. And we will be able to do all of those things next year. So fun team challenges and, really getting people together, especially in a remote environment where we can have a lot of fun while we're focusing on improving, whether it's our behavior, our nutrition, our activity levels. So I think out of all of the positive changes we've made and even adding some new programs, I think that one from a long-term strategy perspective is going to be the most beneficial for our employees and their families.
Love that. If you had unlimited funds and unlimited resources for next year, what is the one thing on your wish list that you could implement but haven't yet? Maybe you will next year after you put it out there, but something that would improve the employee experience during open enrollment.
Julia, any ideas?
Daniela, you go first.
Oh, that is so
I'm going to be careful what I say.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's rough. I think it's more about like where we want to put our dollars with the feedback. And just to me, it's not about the dollars. It's meeting our employees where they are. And Sheila Kruger used to lead benefits at Zoom, and she has her own consultancy. But there's one thing that has always stuck with me since I've met her. And she says, it's not about the return of impact, it's the return of individual. And if you think with that mindset, you can kind of craft your offerings in a different manner than you probably are today. And for me, I could have $1 million, I'm sure that there are a ton of things that I'd love to offer, but I want to be able to offer something that's right for our company and our culture. And I think that actually evolves and develops over time. So maybe I have more money for feedback sessions or for surveys or to spend more time in areas that we can listen to our employees. But that, again, comes year over year, and we're just getting started. And I think that's where we can really lean in and build our programs.
I agree with all of that. I think the investment in our people is critical. I think the investment in programs that focus on preventive care. I mean, I'd love if I had an open checkbook, that's where I would put my money, is really focusing on getting the preventive care and the early detection of those chronic conditions as soon as possible. We can't we can't avoid, right? Like, or we can't eliminate chronic disease. But what we can do is really put our dollars in an area that's going to allow us to identify now or early. And then what that ends up doing, as we all know, is the cost of care isn't as expensive as it is when you have a very late stage, disease state that's been identified too late. We also really want to focus on. I had a leader many years ago who said, it's just good business sense to make our benefits accessible and affordable. And it's true, because the cost of care is just way too high, not only for employers, but really for our employees. And so how do we start to really bend that curve and figure out, how do we eliminate the hurdle of people getting the care that they really deserve and they need, while balancing those costs? Because there is an added cost to eliminating the hurdle. But how do you get there? And it's not in a year, it's probably a longer term strategy. But I think that's where the data plays just such a critical role in how can we really use it to build that long-term strategy and ultimately eliminate those hurdles like copays and coinsurance, and really go back to the basics, which is, I know what I pay, I know what I owe. And, you can walk out of your doctor's office feeling relieved that it's not going to be a much higher out of pocket expense. So I think, yeah, preventive care, listening, and trying to figure out how to eliminate that hurdle going forward.
Both great answers. Thank you. Before we wrap up, I just have to ask the question, because everyone would love to hear from you guys. I've had some great advice along the way, so thank you for all of the tips, tricks, and just pro advice you've given throughout the session. But if you could give one piece of advice to your team, and honestly, probably every other team that's out here being represented by somebody listening as well, one piece of advice that would help with open enrollment for next year, what would your one golden piece of advice be?
Don't overthink it. I think the one thing that I even know that I struggle is, are we doing enough? And if we're not, how do we get there? And sometimes what we're doing really is enough. And it doesn't have to be all whistles and bells to make it important and for your employees to absorb the information that they need to. Be clean, be clear, be concise. The more straightforward you are, the better. Again, it doesn't always need all the fluff that we think it does, but if you have the ability to make it fun, great. But that shouldn't be your biggest priority.
I would echo that. I would also encourage my team to always think about the why. Why are we doing it? What's in it for our audience, our consumers? And I also think that it's critical to communicate with all areas of the business, but there's different, right, communication strategies for your leadership team, for your people leaders, for the employees, and engaging each one of those stakeholder groups throughout the year actually gives you a much better outcome during open enrollment, when people understand what the challenges are. And then that way they can say, okay, it makes sense that this is how, what we're going to be offered for the following year. But I think the communication is absolutely so critical. And you also can build some support from your leadership team, your people leaders as well, to have them help in the delivery and messaging of some of these really important messages that it's kind of hard to do with a very lean team if you don't have the right technology in place to help support it.
Great advice from both of you. Thank you. I want to thank Hacking HR for putting this session together and allowing us to share so many good little tips, tricks, nuggets of wisdom. Thank you, Felia and Daniela, for taking the time this morning to be with us. For everyone who's watching, thank you so much for joining us. We're just very grateful you all were here. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you all soon.